Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to breathe easier and ditch your perfectionism, then do we have the Perfection Detox show for you. Today I'll be talking with Petra Kolber, internationally renowned fitness authority and happiness facilitator who's choreographed and starred in over 60 award-winning workout programs and is the author of a perfect new book on letting go of perfectionism, the Perfection Detox. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about taming your inner critic, living bravely, and unleashing your joy. That, plus we'll talk about losing friends in Tuscany, showers and rumination, gotcha, George Foreman and Nancy Kerrigan, full packages, Special K and Reebok, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, black pants and hot days, and what in the world non-adjoining rooms away from elevators have to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Petra. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, I am, Michael. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and a mighty woohoo for having you on the show.
Thank you. And you have read the book, that is for sure.
I have read the book. I love the book, and I must admit, I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. And there is no better single cure for perfectionism than having a daily show.
I can totally see that. Yes.
Because if you don't get it right, well, you got to move on. If you don't get it right,
Yeah.
well, you've got to move on. And eventually
Yeah.
you go, I give. So if we go back in time to your story, if we go to your earliest days, Northern England, I believe, where exactly did you grow up and were you a perfectionist then?
Yeah, no, Michael, I grew up near Liverpool and I used to talk like this. So I definitely was not a perfectionist that I remember, and growing up in Northern England, I don't even know if the word perfect, we were surviving. We basically trying to survive at that point. But my first memory of trying to appear different on the outside than to what I was on the inside, I'm guessing around about 6, 7, 8, when I suddenly realized my dad was a bit of a drinker, and that was something I didn't want to share with the world. So to make up for that, because as we know, you can't control the people around you, I thought, how can I try and control my circumstances? So I tried to appear perfect, say the perfect thing, be the perfect student, be the perfect daughter. And so I think that's how it began. But was I born that way? No, I don't think any of us are really. And the environment that I grew up on, we certainly were not built upon this idea of actually not in England, especially up north, Michael. If anything, you're taught to like downplay, like become smaller, like standing out and striving for great things, which requires perfection, was not part of the dialogue at that time of my life.
Wow. So I can't believe I'm going to share this. I've been telling my audience about how I've been getting into recreationally, getting back into bicycle racing. I was a professional athlete for many years. I was a speed skater. I was a cyclist. And I struggled quietly as a child. In fact, I lost way too much weight before the national championships and then fell apart in them. I struggled with an eating disorder. And I guess you had a similar challenge going into the dance and fitness world.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially like your sport, I would imagine, I don't know, is, the lighter you are,
Bingo.
well, yes, the faster you can go. And in dance, when our body is part of our instrument for whether it's racing on a bike or moving your body to, hopefully be the instrument, it's really hard to separate who you are from what you do. And so, yes, in my early days, I was also in the area where in London, where all the work was, the fashion du jour was to be very skinny. So half the time you were getting the job, not necessarily for being the best dancer, but for fitting into the costume. So a part of that was to get more work. I got incredibly skinny. Had an eating anorexic, and you can only keep that up for so long. Then I went the other end of the spectrum. I always say, as a recovering perfectionist, I had 2 eating disorders, so I had to get both ends. But there's a real struggle. That's just a symptom of the inner turmoil. And I think sometimes maybe in athletics, I don't know, Michael, it doesn't start with the intention of going down that road, but how do I become better? How do I become faster? How do I become, more perfect at my sport? And for some sports and dancing, unfortunately, weight was a part of the equation. And I took on that instead of just making a piece of the story, I made it the entire story. And then how I looked, including my weight, became a big part of whether I define myself as moving towards success or away from success.
And that's fascinating because you were incredibly successful. And we're going to jump in there. But the word define myself meant that though the external situation may have been, sponsorship, TV this, recording that, all this glitz and glamour and great stuff, I'll put that in quotes, mind you.
Right.
But how you were defining yourself is you look in the mirror and that's how I am today. Whether I am perfect or not perfect is a good day or a bad day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't use the word perfect at the time, Michael. Okay, in different periods of my life, it was different things I was using for that definition. So as a dancer, it was what was my number on the scale? Mm-hmm. As the fitness expert, it was two things. In the beginning, it was how many, did I have a 6-pack, a 4-pack, or an 8-pack? So it was like, how lean was I? Then as I became more of a educator, mm-hmm. It was how smart did I feel? So the scale changed from what I looked like, how much I weighed, to how lean I was, to how smart I thought I was. So it's interesting, depending on where I was in my life process, my definition and the scale I used changed.
Wow. So if we go through your story, you go to Broadway, eventually you trade in your dance shoes for fitness shoes. Yes. You've got a deal with Reebok, you end up on TV, and then you got sick as well.
Yes, it's so funny. You never forget having cancer. You never forget having cancer. But it was 20 years ago, and I remember I had a melanoma on my foot in like about 1998, and that was one where you go in, you cut it out, you check the edges. So it was interesting because it was on my foot. So I had to cancel a couple of conventions. But we healed and it was all good. Then 2 years later, there was a lump on my neck, and it was the diagnosis was Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 2A. But for 2 weeks there, we weren't sure. And I remember I was actually up at Reebok. I just thought about this now. I was up at Reebok when I got a phone call from my doctor saying, we know it's cancer, but we don't know what type of cancer it is. You need to come back and we need to do another biopsy. So there was a week there where we weren't sure if it was something like a lymphoma because they thought it was in the lymph system, or their fear was it was the melanoma that had metastasized. So yeah, so the short story, if there is one around that, is for 6 months I went through chemo, radiation, I lost my hair. But at that point, I didn't care about being perfect because it was about surviving. Yeah. It was like I'd already faced this idea of who cares if I'm perfect enough? I'm alive. I'm going to have doctors that can take care of me. I have nurses who are my angels. And so that I say oftentimes that when I had cancer, and more so when I was going through the treatment, I probably did my most fearless and brave living ever because you've already faced the worst,
How much of that were you, thank you for sharing on that, how much of that were you able to carry forth, that mindset or that understanding of yourself as you came back from that, I'm guessing, almost surreal period of your life?
Yeah, great question. I think like the first year, I think for any one of your viewers and listeners that might have gone through cancer, we're sisters and brothers, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but you'll know the first 6 months out are terribly scary. I think through any illness, not just cancer, when nurses visits and doctors visits had become a part of your routine. So you at least twice or 3 times a week, you're getting blood work, you knew where you were on your progress. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, bye, go and live your life. And you're like, what do you mean? So it's finding that new normal again. So my first year out, I'd say I managed to hold on to that because it was that gratitude for the extraordinary of having your ordinary life back. Then 5 years out, 15 years out, you begin to roll back into the old way of living and maybe I do consider myself a very grateful person, but there are moments where that sense of enoughness of, let's go on and live our best day and be of service and do the best work that we can into the world. Sometimes we forget that the further we move away from that cancer part of our lives.
So, and for myself on the NDE side of things, for a while, you're completely consciously aware of everything, and then you go back into the old grooves in the record. Those grooves are really deep, and then you have to catch yourself and go, wait a second, what's big picture here?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's with any work that we do, Mike, as you know, the tapes, the grooves, as you call them, the digital downloads, whatever it is, that have been with us for so long. And I think whatever you're struggling with, can be a little bit tricky in the world that we live today with social media, the bumper sticker, kick fear to the curb, live life. And that's great. But life isn't a bumper sticker. And as you know, it takes work. You have to work the work for it to work. And I think with anything, whether it's anxiety, perfection, lack of feeling enough, whatever our shadow side is,
Mhm.
it takes work and it takes awareness and it takes daily practice. And then also self kindness on the days you forget and you kind of go back a few steps.
Yeah.
It's all of the above.
So if we go into your work, and I don't know the exact timeline, please forgive me on this. When did
No.
the panic attacks start, and what was the
Mm.
work you had to put into those?
Yeah, that's a great question. It all began around perfectionism, but I didn't know that at the time. So I didn't know what I was looking at. What I can look back now with big picture was that when I first moved into fitness from being a dancer, the stakes were low. I was the new kid on the block. I was that girl with a strange accent with a name no one could pronounce. So the stake, and then as you was very kind to share with your audience, I became really successful. And so then the stakes became higher. No one ever told me I needed to be smarter, thinner, lean. That was all my own story. And I think when I was being positioned as a fitness expert, I call it I suddenly felt I should be smarter. I didn't have the master's or the PhD. So what happened is I began having these anxiety attacks, just this idea of the imposter syndrome. Someone's going to find me out. Someone's going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. So I was always like 2 steps ahead, waiting to be found out. Didn't recognize that at the time. So that was anxiety. But because that was a negative, it wasn't Petra, shiny, VHS at the time. I'm aging myself. I put that into a little box. What you don't own owns you. So the anxiety then grew into panic attacks. And what I share in my book, Michael, is many people have panic attacks. And we often, some people, I never went to the hospital with one, but they are all consuming. Your brain, it's that reptilian brain just going into fight, flight, or freeze. Well, I could hide all my symptoms. I had one I couldn't hide. 0 to 60, full body sweat. It would have, like when you look like at the end of your cycle,
Yep.
like cycling outdoors, like if we were having an interview right now, which we are, not if, in our interview right now, if
Well,
we
then
had,
I'm doing my job. If it doesn't feel like an interview,
there
then
you go.
then I'm doing
Yeah.
my job.
So we had, maybe you asked a question I didn't know the answer to.
Yeah.
So I would like, oh my gosh, they're judging me. The audience is judging me. And like what would happen in 60 seconds, my hair, I would have a full blown sweat. So you can't hide that. So that's the moment I realized I got to do something about it. And it took a long time to get through it. And I can't even remember the original question, Michael. I apologize.
That's okay.
But that's how it kind of manifested itself. It was this idea of not being perfect that my body took on as the real story. I wasn't looking at it through a compassionate lens. So I kind of turned on myself. And because it wasn't pretty and perfect, I didn't look at it until my body went, we got to, so it kind of put itself into such a mode, I couldn't ignore it any longer.
Yeah. And it's actually good. It's actually good if the body will share something with us. And I have an expression for kind, gentle, easy, good. If it will do it in a kind manner, if we can hear it before the volume's cranked up too much. So actually
Yeah.
that was a beautiful answer. And I remember reading something in the book. I think you had come out of a talk, actually maybe it was a full day talk or a 2-session, and you came out in the middle. And there was, in through the lobby, was your dermatologist who had, in a sense, saved your life.
Yes.
And you actually did something that took you out of that panic attack. And you may not have even realized the importance of what you had done in that moment.
Exactly. Panic, for many people who have panic attacks or anxiety attacks, what happens is the fear of actually having the attack is worse than the attack itself. And as you know, fear or false expectations appearing real. And so what happened on that day, I saw my dermatologist out of context. And this was a reoccurring theme for me. If I saw people out of context, like I could teach to an audience of 1,000 people because I had the microphone and no one has control of the room, but I had this false idea of having control of the room. But when I see people on the street, and at the time I was recognized within the fitness world, and say if someone came up to me in a restaurant and simply wanted to say that they enjoyed my work, I would have a panic attack because maybe I was eating the wrong food. Maybe I had a glass of wine next to me. Maybe I wasn't dressed. All this self-judgment. So what happened that day, my dermatologist, she was actually there for a dermatology convention, and I saw her out unexpectedly. And so I had built in this, seeing someone out of context, my body now became very, very familiar with that. We've got to shore up. We've got to protect ourselves. We have to figure all this out. So I could feel this panic attack coming on. And right in front of her, the first time in my life, instead of rushing away, saying I need to go to the restroom, I need to wash my hands and appear extremely rude, I said, Diane, I think I might be having a panic attack. Please, if I begin to perspire, really sweat, just ignore it, and then I'll move through it. And because I faced it, Michael, instead of pushing it away, it went away. Because again, like we said, what you don't own owns you. And so I suddenly put a light onto what I thought was my dark spot. And by looking at something through the lens of compassion, and then also having someone who meets you and goes, I'm here with you. We'll hold a space until you get to the other side of it without judgment. It was the first time I didn't try and bypass the panic, which never works, by the way. I went through it, and I liked what you said, the ease. What were the 4 words that you said, Michael?
Kind, gentle, easy, good.
Yeah. So I was kind, gentle. It was an easy process to get me to the other side for the first time. And I think like the kind, gentle, easy, good, what I had the pebble, the rock, the brick wall. The pebble was the anxiety.
Yeah.
The panic was the rock. And then I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. And so and the world opens up for you with kindness.
Woohoo! So let's talk today about a perfection detox. And in a sense, perfection detox is not a perfection bypass. This is leaning into the work.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's great that you said that, because I think in this world of bumper stickers and some of the people I love, and there's so many great people talking right now about, don't worry about being perfect. Don't, yes, but to tell a recovering perfectionist how to do that, it actually makes me feel more anxious, because then I feel like, oh, this is something I should just be able to get over.
Mhm.
But like you said, it's those tapes, it's those grooves. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's like slow burn, sizzle, fire. And so by the time it gets to this anxiety, panic, just unease, it's been years of us with this inner critic telling us this false belief system. So it's this idea of unraveling, not changing who you are at all, but returning home to who you always were before someone said, you're not this enough or you're too much of that. So I think in this world is a detox, and it's not. I wanted so badly, Michael, with the first chapter of the book to go roses and butterflies and unicorns and no, it's like we got to get into the mud. We have to get into what this has been, these false stories we've been telling ourselves for years, if not decades in my case. And then you have to clean out the mud to make room for the good stuff. If we bypass, we're never clearing. Our brain's just getting fuller and fuller and fuller. So it's until we get rid of the negative. They always say, like, and this is what you talk about, meditation and mindfulness. We have to get rid of the weeds, but keep the flowers, keep of all the goodness of who we are. But we have to make space. And I think that was the first part that's so hard for us. We have to become those human beings.
Yeah.
I'm a perfectionist, so we're human doings. Okay, tell me what I need to do to get through this. Yeah, you actually just have to be. Well, how do I do that perfectly? So it's just like, and so I'm hoping that the book just allows us to go, oh, and then with kindness and compassion, recognize the negatives, the negativity that we've been feeding our own heart space for so long. And then by cleaning that out, we make room for the good stuff to come in. And as I'm sure many of your guests have said, this whole idea of negativity sticks to us like Velcro, positivity slides off us like Teflon. So I want this book to reverse that and allow the good to stick for good. So you have to do the work and then work the work to make this a lifelong practice.
I love it, and it's one of the things I chuckled about when I got the book in and you did an exceptional job with it. Is people who are recovering perfectionists go to this book, and you know that they can make recovering from perfectionism now
Oh
their
yeah, full-time job.
perfectionist chase.
Yes, exactly. And oh, it's so funny, just you mentioned that. So, you know, before I did the book, I did many, many beta groups and workshops. And, you know, it's over 10,000, 100,000 hours. But when I was really beta testing it, I wanted to get immediate like feedback of what I did well, what could be done better. And the number one thing was I told them, I'm going to give it to you in 21 days. And I'm not expecting anyone to do this in 21 days. But so many people said, I feel like I failed because I didn't. I'm like, oh, bless. I know. But I got, and I know, and then they started laughing at themselves, going, "Oh, this is another lesson, right?" I'm like, kind of. So yeah.
So on that note, one of the things, and I'm going to dive into many of these steps, but one of the things that you recommend people do, and we have a program on automatic writing. We are so into journaling and writing and writing and writing. You talk about the importance of having a journal through this process.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is again to your audience. This is nothing new. It's that idea of taking a moment of pause because we're so busy. You can think things through. You can even say them out loud, but to really embed the work, I think, into your heart, journaling, you know, as you know, and the research is showing over and over again, it's going to make the work that we're doing stick a little more. And I think it's just a nice time just to get off this technology and get out a pen, get out the paper, find something that's really yummy to you. And it's almost like an invitation to have time, a little date with yourself. Yes. And reflect back. And then also, I think what's really great is, because we're going to come back to this book hopefully, and then you go back into your real life, and then maybe a year passes, like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety again. You revisit the book and your journal, and then instead of starting like, I'm going all the way back to step number one, you look at your journal and go, no, I really haven't. Maybe I've just got a little sidetracked for a little bit. It helps you remind yourself of all the work you've already done, so you're not back at the starting line. I think journals help us as we reflect back, as you know, not ruminate, we reflect back with kindness. It allows us to remember all the work that we're doing to be our best selves, so that we can share our best self and do the best work in the world.
I love it. And it truly is. We're never a record going straight around. We may hit that same groove in the record, but we're always spiraling upwards. And so having a tool to remind us of how far we've come, helps us from then going right back into that perfectionist groove. Let's talk about your thoughts for a minute. And you have step number one. So yes, your thoughts. So specifically, you have a top 3 hits.
Right. Well, it's like, you know, like those top 3 hits, you know, that the song that you hear on the radio, you can't get it out of your mind, but you don't always realize it's spinning in your mind until you're like, why can't I get this out of my mind? But that's a positive feed forward. The thing about our top 3 hits, oftentimes they become such a part of our internal conversation, we don't even realize they're there. And so it's just bringing that pause of awareness. And I think people go, I don't always know what mine, the question I have coming back is, I don't know what mine are. And oftentimes it's just because, unfortunately, they become such a familiar bit of your dialogue, you no longer hear them. But that doesn't, as you say, that great saying, watch your thoughts because they become your words. You know, and they're so fast and there's so many of them. So again, that's where journaling really comes into play, recognizing like, and maybe this idea of, it's normally the same thought in a different disguise. So for mine, my biggest thought was I should be smarter. So my top 3 hits would be like, I can't believe you're such an idiot. Or like, how did you make that mistake again? Or like, they're going to think you're such a fraud. I mean, different sentences saying the same thing. You're not this enough, not that enough. So again, the interesting thing is, if any of your listeners or viewers find those very easily, I like the sentence of, "Ooh, that's interesting," versus going, "That's a good thought, that's a bad thought." Take good and bad out of the equation, because as perfectionists, we're really good at labeling things: smart or stupid, fit or fat, good or bad, you know, black or white. If I go, "That's interesting," it allows that lens of curiosity, compassion, without the self-judgment. We need self-inquiry, as your tribe knows so well. We need to have self-inquiry, but without self-judgment.
Thank you. One of the brilliant things that you said in there were many of them, but one of them is that what slips out of you is what's your internal dialogue. So if you're going, no, no, I'm not really that smart, I'm not really that good looking, I'm not, we get to really pay attention to that.
Yeah. And I think now we're seeing it's so interesting. Like I can't I my the fitness world, not so much now. We've got much more mindful and meditations brought into that world. But 15, 10 years, even 10 years ago, very, very, very structured. There wasn't a lot of room for mindset, let's say, which was a big mistake, I think, on our part. I think that's why we didn't do as well as we should have. But this idea now, we know science is now proving, oh, I just have negative thoughts. Just don't it's just I just talk to myself like that way. It doesn't really have an impact. And as we know, science is showing, I know your brain cannot tell the difference. You think you're stupid, your life will unfold that way. You think you're fat, you will you'll do self-destructive things. Your body will follow through what your brain is believing. Not easy, certainly not woo-woo. Like, as you know, this is so big. Oh, it's like I always call it, I like it, the science behind the woo-woo. We're seeing behind so much science behind what you guys have known, what your show talks about for thousands of years. Now science has to come and say, well, we're proving this. But again, I think it's also for some of the people I speak to, they need the science. So when I can show this is the science that supports this idea of what you say, what you believe, it drives your focus, it drives your life, it will drive, your intention. So yeah, I mean, and this idea of, oh, yeah, I speak to myself negatively. This is why this is the work that's so important, because when you speak to yourself that way, we know how you treat others is often a reflection of how we treat ourselves. So how can we sharpen and strengthen and sweeten our internal dialogue, so then that will just reflect in every area of our life.
I love it. One of the earliest places we may need to start is with our expectations. Because if we set our expectations, if we end up in 3 different hotel rooms before we're comfortable.
Who are we talking about?
No idea.
Yeah, so again, as perfectionists, and there's nothing wrong in having ideals. There's nothing wrong in having standards. There's nothing wrong in having goals. Because that's another thing I see, Michael. Well, if I give up my expectations and my desires to be perfect, I'm suddenly going to become a couch potato. Actually, no. You're probably going to work harder than ever, but you're also going to get to enjoy the journey. So, and I think it's the expectation. Well, it's twofold. There can be expectations you place on others, because sometimes we view others as a reflection of ourselves without even being aware of it. And especially if you have children, we need to really look at our expectations that we place on our children, because that can be a burden untoward itself. And then also it's the expectation we place on ourselves. And it's when perfection becomes the basement level. If it's not perfect, it's a disaster. If it's not perfect, I'm not going to share it. If it's not, I'm going to wait till the perfect time or the perfect whatever. And again, we've that big saying, expectations or resentments waiting to happen. And when we're comparing, this is not my quote. I love it. I wish it was, because I use it all the time. By Stephen Furtick. He's a pastor. And he says, the reason we're all suffering with our insecurities is because we're comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Yes.
And so when you have these unrealistic, never mind expectations, these unrealistic expectations, and we never reach them, how is that ever going to add joy or goodness into this journey called life? Nothing wrong in having goals, striving hard, wanting to bring the best of yourself to that, but best doesn't mean perfect.
So, and that's one of the challenge of our social media world today, is people only put their best on there. You don't realize they're a duck paddling like heck through the muck just as you are, but instead you're not feeling on top of your game. Then you see their perfect vacation, their perfect, in quotes, body, this, that, or the other thing, and you just want to go hide under the bed.
Exactly. And I think, There's different research showing that I think if you go onto social media with full attention and intention, it can be a positive thing. I think we're on our phones and technology way too much. I'm not sure where we'll be 5 years from now. But if we go on idly and then all of a sudden, our brain might know this particular image has been photoshopped a million times. It's Instagram filter number 2, one of my favorites. While our brain knows that, our heart doesn't. And especially we have so many images. People are scrolling faster than ever before. And, we know what we're seeing is not real. But yet it's really hard not to compare ourselves to the images we see on the screen. So my thought is, if you are on social media, and a speaker I saw last week, I thought it was he held up a phone and he goes, this doesn't have an opinion. Technology doesn't have an opinion. And I said, oh, I like that. Because I was getting a bit judgy about technology myself. And he goes, it doesn't have an opinion, but how you use it will determine your own opinion of technology and yourself. So I just think if you're going on, or when you're going on to any form of social media, know what it is you want to share. When I go on, it is my intention to hopefully uplift people and make them feel more connected to their best self, not less connected. And then also check in with yourself when you get off social media, a minute, 5 minutes, an hour later. Do you feel better or worse? And use the barometer, use that scale of joy. Does social media bring more joy to your life? If it does, okay, you still manage your time, because screen time will never replace face-to-face time. But if you're not feeling great about yourself when you get off, maybe we need to adjust the feeds we're on, maybe adjust our friends that we're connecting with, and really evaluate, what do we hope to get from all this screen time? At the end of the day, at the end of our life, all these moments we've lost behind our screen, and they're saying on average we're behind our smartphones now 3 hours a day. I don't know if that's your audience, but the average 3 hours, that's 48 days a year. That's terrifying to me.
That's huge. And my wife Jessica, she's a producer. She always challenges me on this. I always at this point and she goes, "Is that your ego saying it?" So I'm going to say it a different way. I always like to say that I don't have a smartphone at this point. I went down that road. I wrote tech columns. I one day got a call in the woods on my phone. I was healing from injury, and it was from a dear friend, and I went home and he canceled my service because it was taking me away from the present moment. And now, with our show doing incredibly well, I'm like, well, social media, I want to take photos. Is there a way to get a phone, which in my world, I'm like, sacrilege. Is there a way to get a phone, but be mindful, to be present with how I use what could be a powerful tool?
Yeah, I think it's all intention. Your work, Michael, it does so much good for so many people. And more people need the message that you do. And it's so interesting. We don't have to, I hate that word, have to. It's good to meet people where they're at. And unfortunately, this day and age, the way you might meet people that don't know of your show yet, it's going to be on the phone. So how can we go with the intention of, I always look at it, and I love the question your wife said, is this ego that you're telling everyone I don't have a smartphone? Because, but again,
she'll challenge me left, right, and center.
I like your wife, yes. But also people need to know about you, and they're often going to listen to you or watch you on their phone. So how can you share your message? And again, I all believe it's like, and be mindful. Almost like, how long do I want to spend on there? How can I manage? And maybe it's not, for some of us, for example, my book just came out. I know for me personally, as much as I say, do not let the critics get to your heart and do not let the praise go to your head. I see negativity bias. I might have, and look, I'm not even going to say what my reviews have been good so far, but even so, I have my assistant, Sarah. I'm like, Sarah, you need to go on for me, because this is not good for me. This, I know for me, I take it, it's hard for me to, because I want everyone, no, let me rephrase that. I don't want everyone to love my book. I want my book to do really good work in the world, But it's still hard for me because here's the other thing. I say, Seth Godin said this, to be remarkable, you'll be remarked upon, the good and the
Yes.
not so good. And I don't consider myself, I don't think I have a big ego. Of course, I have a healthy ego because you have to put yourself out there in the world. But yet my heart still cracks very easily, just a little bit. If it's hard for me still, and I'm working my own work to separate what I do from who I am. So if I get a negative review, she will tell me this. If she sees something that like of value, the where I could improve my work, because I am a constant learner and I need to become a better writer and a better speaker, but I no longer consider myself, I can still be a really good speaker and still get better. But so I think for you with social media or anyone listening, find out what works with your heart, what works to share your message, because that's important too. And I think when we can remember our audience versus us, how can you reach your audience? Where is your audience? And even if you might not have a smartphone, many of your listeners probably do.
So
And they'd be
true.
like, actually, I would like to take you, Michael, in my pocket on my walks. So again, it's just like always doing it with the good intention. Then I don't think you can make a bad decision.
Woohoo! I love it, and thank you for sharing in your book. And my reaction as a published author myself, who's had his share of great reviews and some that were really, really stinging.
Yeah.
Overall, I've found that the more the conversation is going, even
Yeah.
if the conversation isn't the direction you would like it to be, the more that conversation is there, the more your book actually gets out there. And having a
Mm.
little bit of that polarity, like that woohoo that I did. Jessica's
Yeah.
always like, don't do too much of that. I'm like, it's who I am. It bubbles up. There's nothing I can do about it. And you occasionally get somebody who says, love your show, hate your woohoo. And the fact is, you have to put yourself out there, your
Yeah.
true, authentic, not your faux self, as you say, your full self. And
Yeah.
it not only is as it is, there's a tremendous positive energy behind doing so.
But I think it's like, and like you talk about the full package, because in the book I talk about, we often think to be the full package, we need to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's only half the package. Because to be a human being, we need contrast. To be interesting, to have a conversation, like you just said in reviews, we need contrast. If everyone's just saying love it 5 stars, and I'm not saying that any of you need to go on and leave it 1 star. I hated it. We don't need that.
Subliminal here. Leave a 5 star. Leave a 5 star.
No.
Love the
But
book. Love the
again, like
book.
you
Love
say,
the book.
you can't, you need contrast to get a conversation going.
Mhm.
You need hits and misses. You need good days, bad days. So the full package to me is your highlight reel and your backstory.
Mhm.
It's the good days and the not so good days. I think the more we work the work and the more I work my own work, Michael, it allows me to say, look, I had this conversation, like, as much as I've done this, it still stings if you get a bad review, or it still stings if someone doesn't like you. But what I can do now is I get to go, oh, stings, and then I move on, versus carry that sting and make it a wound. And then like a 2 weeks later, I'm still thinking about that review. So it's just, I'm a human being, but of course it's going to sting, but then you move on. It's just human being.
So I want to go back to thought for a minute,
Mm,
and the thoughts that are in our head and catching our thought. And one to me that's so important that you have is, as a very important step for you, is to ask, whose is this?
right. Whose voice is in your head? Because
Bingo.
yeah, I think and this is the tricky thing. And I just there's a couple of voices that are in my head that I thought were mine until I was 49. And I went, that's not even my voice. It was a teacher or a coach from like when I was 16. And so what happens is, especially if we have a role model that we really respect, and it might not always be your parents, because sometimes my mom was busy, doing 3 jobs to keep a roof over her head, because my dad, bless his heart and rest in peace, he was a salesman, and because he drank, he lost his driver's license. So at some point, yeah. So when you're a salesman, you don't have a car, pretty hard to sell. And this was before the internet.
Yeah.
So mom was out, doing 3 jobs. So my role models were my dancing teachers, my choreographers that I revered. And so if they told me you're not this enough, not that enough, I was too young to go, oh, that's just their opinion. So what happened is I took their opinion and made it my truth. And it's interesting, Michael, because I remember my sister and I had conversations, maybe when I was in my 30s, and we would talk about my father, and I would say, oh, just let that go now. And I thought I had let it go, but I hadn't. It was one of those grooves that it took me going, and I was in therapy for 7 years, and we spent all of that time looking at what needed to be fixed. So I never really got to the root cause of it. It's not until I went back to school for positive psychology, I went, and I don't know how it was, all these pieces coming together. And I was like, some of these voices have got nothing to do with me, because I was so busy anchoring into this idea of not enoughness versus focusing on all that I am, not from an egoic place, but I was so rooted in those grooves of all that I wasn't, that it took me that pause, like you said, to suddenly go, these aren't even my voices, and sometimes we can figure it out on our own. Sometimes it requires professional help. If the pain and the anxiety and the panic and the distress and the unease is just so heavy, get help, because sometimes this is not work that we can do on our own, because, like you said, those grooves are so deeply embedded. We don't have an entry point. So for me personally, therapy was an entry point, but it wasn't the finishing line. And it's still not the finishing line, but I actually did a lot of work on my own afterwards based on the science of positive psychology. I think hand in hand was the missing piece that allowed me to really feel complete, And I still have bad, we're human. I have moments where I'm like, oh, there's a book I should be reading, because I forget, I suddenly compare myself to the authors out there or the keynote speakers, but then I can catch it earlier and go, oh, that's interesting. What triggered that thought? And then from a place of self-compassion, we move forward.
Woohoo!
How many woohoos are we up to? I like this.
I shouldn't keep count. I think it's 3 or 4. I've had people tell me that they know whether it's a great show or not based on how many woohoos. But I try. It doesn't work. I try to keep that tune down.
And I'm not comparing. I'm trying to compare my woohoos to your previous guest.
Oh, geez, no.
Kidding.
Wow. Where do we go with that? Okay. I want to go into positivity. I wanted to mention Perfectly Human, Tal Ben-Shahar, had him on the show. Love him. Love him.
Oh, my mentor. And, this is what I know for sure. I don't know anything for sure. But as we get older, and a part of perfectionism, it doesn't allow us to ask for help. And what I learned through positive psychology and writing a book and becoming a speaker, the greatest lesson I think I've learned by letting go of this idea, I need to be perfect, Petra, is like, I'm very comfortable now saying, I don't know how to do this. How do you do this? What's next steps? Tal Ben-Shahar, can we just take a moment? One of the most generous, wisest, kindest thought leaders. And he might, to have someone who I revere that much, who I was lucky enough to spend a year with, 2 of those weeks in person, who will pick up the phone, who will read my book, who will just the most generous, kindest human beings, one of them that I know.
Woohoo! There.
That's for you, Tal. That's for you.
So, and I want to go into positive psychology in a moment. Before we do that, you have something in here that was really important. Don't know if we have time for the whole CBS story, but you have a yes habit, which I think is really important for people.
I'll do it really quickly. I think if we're perfectionists, we're waiting for the perfect moment to say yes. Yeah. Waiting for, I'm going to be perfect. And then, so my brick wall was, I'd been turning down TV work for a long time, for 2 years. Suddenly my soul decided to say enough. Instead of my head going, you're not enough, my soul went enough. And CBS had called me to be on their show. And my immediate response was, I'm too busy. Wasn't too busy. I was afraid of not being perfect enough. Called them back and they said, this is my brick wall moment. They were like, so happy that you came on the show. You're going to be on the show. We've been trying to get on the show for 2 years. I had 2 weeks. So I said yes before I was ready to say yes. So I said yes, and I knew I had 2 weeks for the show. And so in those 2 weeks, I did my yes and I then did the work to get ready for my yes. And I think what happens, Michael, is we wait to be ready before we say yes. And so we turn down so many opportunities because we think the job. I'm not ready to go for the job. I'm not ready to ask that person out. I'm not ready to start my podcast. I'm not ready to start my blog. Say yes, give yourself an external deadline that the universe can hear, and she will conspire in your favor. And then you do the work, you do the research, you ask the people that you need to ask for help, you reach out to people, and then you do the work to get ready for your yes. But don't wait to be ready to say yes. It will never happen. Especially, and I say that especially as your dreams get bigger, those yeses are going to become more scary. So just say yes and then do the work.
I love it. You say yes, you jump off the cliff, and then you go,
Yeah.
and
And you earn your wings on the way down.
woohoo! I'm getting self-conscious. Recover, reframe, repeat.
So yes, I mean that's with anything, isn't it? I mean this idea of that quick judgment that happens so quickly, and it's just when we can like notice that and then reframe that thought from "I'm not enough" to like "I'm enough," and there might be still work to do, whatever that recurring thought could be, and just reframe. And I think what you talk about mindfulness and meditation in your show is like just take a breath. You know, we get 18,000 do-overs during our waking hours. Just take a power of the pause, knowing we're doing the best that we can, know we're all in this together, know that more people than not feel the very same way that you do. This imposter syndrome of not being smart enough, thin enough, whatever. Most of us struggle with that at some point in our lives. So we just can connect on the humanity. I say we connect in our cracks, and then we help each other get to the other side.
Beautiful. From there, how do we see, and this is kind of the big picture theme of what we're talking about, is we're perfect and beautiful just as we are. How do we
Yeah.
see the beautiful truth of who we really are?
It's a good question. I have not heard it put in that way. Well, I think here's the thing. The truth is, you're perfect. And it's also not. It's how I think you said. How do you remember that? It's how do we revisit? It is that, isn't it? It's remembering. Mm, I think we remember it. It's in those small moments when we get out of our heads, when suddenly like we feel like those bliss moments when we're in nature and you're in a sunrise and you're completely connected into the present moment. I think how we remember it the best is we anchor ourselves in the breath, because perfection only resides in the past or the future. Mm-hmm. We are comparing ourselves to who we were, or we're worrying about who we should be, or so the way you remember the best and the truth of who you are, you take a breath, because perfection can't reside there. It doesn't know what to do with mindfulness. Or again, we approach ourselves from a place of gratitude. We bring on that, what is one thing I'm grateful for today? It doesn't even have to be about us, but coming from a place of gratitude, perfection and gratitude cannot reside in the same heart space.
Amen. I wasn't planning on going there. We have had her on the show. I love that you brought her up. Self-compassion and Christian Neff.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we have referenced her in the book. It's this idea of we speak to others with if we had that thought bubble in our head, and if people could see how we speak to ourselves and treat ourselves, we would never be our own best friend. But again, Kristen Neff did such a great job of like self-compassion and self-kindness is not selfish. But no one teaches us to take care of ourselves. So it's almost like a radical act of it's that balance between selfish and selfless. And if you can come into the middle and then treat yourself with love and kindness, you're only naturally going to be able to share more of that with the people around you. So actually, it's selfish if you don't do the work, because then you'll never bring your best self to the world, and the world needs you. The world needs your voice, your idea, your story.
I love how you put that. It's selfish if you don't do the work. I love it. I love it. What can you tell us about forgiveness and self-forgiveness?
Well, I think it's forgiving ourselves over and over again. Oh, one of my therapists, and this is in the book, I think forgiveness is so tricky. Oh, it's so tricky. But she said to me once, and it might be forgiving yourself, it might be forgiving the past. She had said to me, forgiveness is not letting others off the hook for unforgivable actions or words, but it's unhooking yourself from the negative actions of the past, so it doesn't affect your positive future. And that includes ourselves. And unhooking ourselves from those grooves that you talk about. And then going, when we find ourselves going, oh, how could I be thinking that way again? Take a breath, come back to the present, forgiveness. And it might be forgiving ourselves over and over again. And it doesn't mean letting other people off the hook, but you also have to let yourself off the hook at some point to go, I'm trying over and over again to bring my best self into the next imperfect moment.
So on that note, then, letting go of unhooking ourselves from our regrets.
Yes. I mean, regrets can bring, oh, well, I think there's nothing. There's this difference. It's like regret versus. There's almost like a grieving. I think we have to grieve sometimes the past that we had hoped for. We have to kind of grieve who we had hoped we thought we were going to be. But these regrets of that we carry with us, they're more like there's more baggage. So it's like sometimes the imperfect past, the regrets of what we had hoped for, our hopes and our dreams. It's just it's again, I think, which lens you view them from. It's like, how can I look at my past from a lens of curiosity and compassion versus the regrets of I wish I had done this, I should have done that. So again, it's just the language that we use and bringing more like hope, curiosity, optimism versus judgment, self-doubt. And I hate to say the word loathing sometimes. We can really have these very dark views of ourselves. So it's just, again, how can we, from this humanness and connectedness, just do those reboots like you had mentioned before, over and over again, rebreath, regroup, reframe, and then re-inspire ourselves. As you talk, inspired, how can we re-inspire ourselves moment by moment, breath by breath?
So let's go. That's brilliant. So let's go from re-inspire to reignite and go from loathing to love. How do we bring it all back to love?
That's not a deep question. Trying to get the perfect answer right now. How do you bring it all back to love? At the end of the day, isn't that, love is everything. Oh, it's that Ayn Rand says, to say I love you, one must first say the I. And the longest distance any of us, I think, will ever travel is from our head to our heart. But what is this world? What is this journey called life if we can't do it from a place of self-love? And I don't know, and I know we're running out of time, but I'd be curious of your thoughts. I'm actually asking you now. I really feel like the process and maybe the reason that we're here is to learn how to love ourselves.
I couldn't agree more.
I don't know if that's it. Isn't that it?
It's something, at least at this point in our evolution, it's something we came here and are taught. We're if we use Don Miguel Ruiz's terms, what would he call it? We're domesticated not to have self-love. Society has taught us that's growing up in Northern England, bring it full circle in this show to where you were at the beginning. If you had said growing up where you did, I love myself, what would people have said to you?
Who do you think you are? You're like braggadocious. So again, love, I think we have such a wrong connotation. Love is not at the expense of anybody else. And that's the northern thing without us realizing is, well, if you succeed, what does that mean for me? Mm-hmm. But it's not at the expense. The more we can look, love is love is love is love is love. And it starts with loving ourselves. And I think that's unfortunately why we're in the state that we are, because there is so much self-loathing. So let's do the inner work. So then one breath, one smile, one kind thought, one kind expression at a time, we get to be the change that we wish to see.
Woohoo! I call love the unlimited sustainable resource.
Unlimited. It's my love of myself doesn't mean I love you any less. It doesn't take away from your love. And I think that's the misnomer maybe that we've taken on along the way, that there's a scarcity of love. And in fact, it's the exact opposite, like you so well said.
Perfect. From there, I want to take off my coaching hat. I want to put it on you today. What one homework assignment do you want to
Mm.
give people, Petra, to help them on their journey from perfectionism?
I think my homework assignment for you would be is to carry a realization. Well, carry a realization that you are not alone. That we often feel very, very separate in our struggles here, and know that the woman or the man to your right, to the left, to your or in front of you, we're all dealing with these same struggles. My homework assignment would be find a mantra. Mine is be here now. It might be I am enough. I like the word pineapple. Find some little like reconnect, refocus, reframe a little word, something that is meaningful to you,
Mhm.
that when you find those grooves getting a little deep, you just say it. Because that, your brain, it will be a redirect. And one of the greatest things we can do is just redirect. And that redirect, I would say, find a quick little mantra I'm enough, be here now. Mine for a while was I refuse to beat myself up. I love myself. All is good in the world, whatever it might be. Pineapple works. And then take that reboot, that reframe, and then take a moment of pause. Take one deep breath in and one deep breath out. Anchor yourself back into the present moment, and that will help you just have awareness, self compassion, and then we get to do the work over and over again.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And as you're saying that, I have my beaded bracelet here. I always
Ah,
have a beaded bracelet because
okay.
I'm continuously running through a mantra. And so if I'm
Mm,
doing an interview, my mantra is I send love. How can
mm.
I send more love? How can I? So it's I send love to bring me back to that place so that the brain wanders. It goes to a groove in the record. Like you're saying, you bring it right back to your mantra and you completely, this is going old school here. We're pressing new grooves in the record.
Yes, yeah, I love that. May I add one more thing?
Please.
Well, I think with perfectionism or any thought that you have and you're not sure if it's a good or bad, let's say, ask yourself one thing. Does this thought, does this action, does it bring me more joy or does it suck the joy out of me? That's your metric. And from that, you can make the decisions that are best for your heart and for your life and for those around you.
Perfect. And on that note, Jessica always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids. So, how
Mm.
can parents help their kids today with perfectionism?
Great question. And your wife's name's Jessica.
Yeah.
Great question, Jessica. So I think what it is our kids see their overnight success on social media. We don't see, even in the influencers, even in the people that have the million. I'm seeing young kids now deleting posts because they don't have 50 likes. I only have 3 likes. I'm going to take the post off. Even if they're following an influencer on social media, we have to go with what our kids are doing, not what we hope them to do. Show that 10,000 hours, show those years of what it took to get to those million likes. If your child likes a tennis player or a soccer star, something that some idol they look up to, whether it's pop society or whatever, an author, go and do the research and share with them all the failures, the epic failures, the turn downs, the rejections, that their overnight success, how it came. Share their backstory to let them know that this idol that we all revere, if you can share as much of the failures, I hate to say it because we're not learning our children don't know how to fail anymore. I think that will go a long way in letting them realize and help this dialogue of what we see on social media, and then really share the backstory of what it took to get to that overnight success. I found that very helpful.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. On that note, what personally brings you the greatest happiness or what I call the woohoo factor?
For me, honestly, they say you have a job, a career, or a calling.
Mhm.
My greatest happiness is when I'm able to stay in the present, be there more than not there. I love travel. I love being with my sister, and I love doing this work. I am at my sweet spot when I'm in front of a group of people, whether it's online or in person, where I get to see one light bulb go off and one person walk out feeling less alone. It's been a good day.
Well, there's a topic that you talk about in the book, and I'm not sure if it's your term or not, but it's a brilliant term, a passionist.
Yes, that is mine. Yes. So we talk about this idea of being a perfectionist. And I say, can we turn from being a perfectionist to a passionist? When we have passion in our lives, it fuels us. And the people that have lived the longest, the blue zones in the world, they have meaning and purpose, and they know they know how to explain to you, Michael. If you say, what brings you meaning and purpose? It's this. That's my passion. And it doesn't have to be passion with a big P, because that can also make us feel worse. Well, I don't have this massive passion, stand from the mountaintop. It could be your garden. It could be, but it's not. It doesn't have to be the perfect garden. It's something that brings you joy. And when we can reframe whatever it might be, maybe you love your work. There's nothing wrong in that. Maybe it's all in with my family. Maybe it's all in with my hobby, whatever it might do. When we can make it about passion, you might work harder than you ever worked before. You might even have longer hours than you did as a perfectionist. But here's the difference. Perfection is fueled by doubt, worry, this idea I'm going to get found out. It has to be perfect to be worthy. Passion allows us to have a lens of curiosity, make failures, strive hard, not be in comparison with others, surround ourselves with people who maybe even are more excellent at something than we are. It allows us to work hard, but allows us to have joy along the way. So the work might be just the same, but the experience of the work is completely different.
Woohoo! So before I let you go, couple last questions. First off, where can people go to find your beautiful book, The Perfection Detox, and to find out more?
Thank you. Well, it's in bookstores everywhere. I still can't believe I say that. It can be downloaded. You're going to, order, now you can get it listening. This is the great thing about technology. So you can go to perfectiondetox.com, and that has all the places that you can buy the book. It has a little bit more of the backstory of the book. So perfectiondetox.com.
Beautiful. And if you didn't catch perfectiondetox.com, come on over to Inspire Nation Show and we'll get you over to perfectiondetox.com. And I want to throw one more shameless plug out there, which is the best way that you can help a book is to post a review on Amazon.
Thank you.
On that note, Petra, this has been so, so, so beautiful. And I know this is going to be tremendously helpful for people. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
I think it's this work of really knowing this is this book and any of the work that Michael's doing. It's not about changing who we are. It's remembering who we always have been. And so it's in the remembering, be as present as you are. And I think my real take home is like, we're all doing this struggle. I've written a book about it and I still struggle this. And it's the humanness of it. So it's just, again, I love this idea of like, oh, my life is interesting. And from a lens of compassion and curiosity, we do the best we can each and every day.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so, so much, Petra. This has been amazing. Love your book. Love your work. And your book is beautiful. The words you speak. And this goes to show you've been behind the mic for so long. In fact, don't you have a podcast?
Oh, I do. Yes. Thank you.
What's your podcast?
The Perfection Detox.
Perfect. Your words, to me, are even more brilliant than what you've written, and what you've written is beautiful.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the gift of your time, and for your listeners for the gift of their time. This has been a really great conversation. It's triggered a couple of thoughts. I'm going to noodle on that for a little bit. So thank you for such a soulful conversation.
Then I have done my job. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the Perfection Detox, and begin remembering who you are today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so, so much, Petra.
You are so welcome. Thank you for the great questions.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed them.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!